All right. What's going on, everybody? It's Riley, and I am here with a good friend of mine, Sherlock, and we are here to discuss Bleach with the recent news of the anime coming back for that final story arc and the Burn the Witch getting expanded into something bigger. We're very excited, and we wanted to do a video talking about what we loved about Bleach, about this series, and as well what went wrong. When did it fall? Like where? What happened that it became notorious for being not great? So, what's going on, man? How are you?
No, what's going on? Well, I guess the same thing is going on for everyone else in terms
Yeah.
of global pandemic, staying at home, and things like that. But it does give you a lot more time to kind of meditate on certain anime where they went wrong. Yeah, just I'm currently rewatching Hunter x Hunter, which is really really good. It's even better the second go around, and it kind of
Nice.
interesting thinking about Bleach, kind of like the things it's achieved that Bleach didn't in terms of power limitations and things like that. And in terms of reading, I just caught up on Beastars Volume 5, which was just like so good. So now I'm just really annoyed having to wait for so long. But I think I'm kind of due for like either reading Vinland Saga or Blade Immortal or one of those long series that I've collected the whole run of, but I just haven't read it yet. So although as we were saying just before, maybe I'll just read Bleach again. And enjoy the rest of that. So yeah. So, but otherwise, going pretty well. I think high five to our collective two for managing to set this up about 12 hours and I don't know 3 days apart or something like that. That's what it feels like with the time.
Yeah. It's so Sherlock is in Australia, if you can't tell by the lovely accent. So we are about 11, 12 hours apart in time. So we had to do a little bit of planning on when to do this. So he's about ready to tuck her in for bed, and I've just woken up. But we're geared up in our Bleach teas, yes. And Sherlock's got his little Nendoroid ready to discuss this series. And yes. I've titled this video, and I don't know if it's true for you as well, but I've titled this video that this was my favorite of the big three. Between Bleach, Naruto, and One Piece, this was it for me, man. Like this one resonated so differently than the other two, and I loved it so much. Like I feel like it informed a lot of my teenage years almost. Like the style and the characters, the just general kind of feel behind the series. As a kid who grew up like in classes and going to school for art and stuff, it even like started to go into the style of how I drew characters and how I drew people. But would you say that's also true? Like, is this the top of the big three for you?
Well, I'm sure I'll get some responses, but I mean, like, I think well, look, with all like due kind of disclosure, I've only read the first 12 volumes of One Piece, so please take that into consideration when deciding my sentence. But I think it is, and I think for me it was like I think you're right. It kind of depends on the context in which you get it, because for me, when I got into Bleach, I was probably around 16, and this was, and I think you probably relate to this as well, compared to maybe some younger fans these days. But back in the bad old days, 15 years ago, trying to get a hold of anime, it was like really tough. And so like finding out Bleach was a thing, like the fact that I even found out it was a thing was a huge thing to me. And I remember overhearing some friends in high school talking about, they're like, oh, is Ichigo gonna learn his Bankai? And I was like, wait, what are you guys talking about? And I'd seen a little bit of anime before then. I'd seen Trigun, Cowboy Bebop, Neon Genesis, and all that. So I wasn't kind of like total novice, but I hadn't really come across anything like really long running, anything that was still kind of ongoing kind of feeling. So I had this kind of really unique kind of feel to it in terms of it was the first time I'd come across it. And I had come across Naruto before, but Naruto was airing on Cartoon Network, and it was like the show my little brother was into. So for me, like Naruto kind of got coded as like, and also I think in the show, at least initially, Naruto's like he's pretty young. Like I don't know if he's like felt like he was like 13 or 12, or it felt like quite young. And
Hmm.
obviously, when you're a teenager, you're like, well, I'm 16, I'm much more mature than these 12-year-olds, kind of feeling like that. And Ichigo being around the same age that I was, I think really kind of like connected. And it was probably like One Piece didn't really have a kind of like presence in Australia, I think, at that point in time. And I'm sure that's a whole other conversation about how it's gotten handled outside of Japan until very recently.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it really did feel like Bleach was kind of very cutting edge in terms of like fashion felt really on point, or like even like actually fashionable. It felt really hip, and it just felt really fresh and modern, which I think was something that I hadn't really come across like in any anime before at that point
Hmm.
in time. So it just really, yeah, it just like the visuals really captured my imagination. But I think the fact that it was like set in the modern day, at least initially,
Hmm.
in terms of where it was located and things like that, it really had a big impact on me in terms of like what attracted me to it.
Absolutely. Like that's actually exactly what I was thinking about was because when I got into it and just my little bit of background, I had
Mm,
already been reading a bunch of manga and watching a bunch of anime, and I remember I used to spend a good chunk of time in the summers at my aunt's house in Kansas, and I had a friend from my grade school years who had moved out to Kansas from Texas, and so every time I would
mm.
visit, he would come over and hang out, and we would play video games and that stuff, and we kind of had the same trajectory in what we were into, and like so one year we would get together, and he was into like I'm trying to think about what things we were into. It was like I think Kingdom Hearts was the thing like one
Oh yeah.
summer. And so
Mm,
we were totally into Kingdom Hearts and we were playing it together at my aunt's place and like talking about theories and stuff. And that's, a whole nother topic. And then the next year, we get back together and I hadn't talked to him for a while and I'm like, oh man, like, I've been reading a bunch of manga. I've been following Shonen Jump magazine and stuff, and I had with me like volumes of One Piece and Naruto that I've been reading like in my downtime while I was out there. And this was very early on, so I only had like the first two volumes of each. Um,
oh wow.
and so he was like, "Yeah, those are both great, but have you heard of Bleach?" And at the time, like, no, because like you're talking about, like the
Mm.
exposure of this stuff was not as it wasn't as prominent. Like you
Oh
you
no.
knew about what was on TV, and you knew about like if you go to the store and you see something and then you're like, "Oh
Mm,
man, what is this?" Like, and that was basically it. And so any exposure to stuff that had not been localized yet was very, very few and far between.
mm.
And he had more like I guess of a presence on the internet as far as like going down those rabbit holes and finding stuff. And I was like, no, I've never heard of Bleach. And he's like, Bleach is the best. Bleach is so much better than all these other things. Like you gotta find it, you gotta read it. And I was like, okay, cool, I'll
Mm.
try. And then within the next year or so, Shonen Jump magazine had put the preview in there. And then they were like, and we'll be starting to publish it bi-monthly in, the paperback form
Mm.
starting whatever, like 2003, 2004. And I was like, oh, hell yeah. So I remember like messaging him. His name was Robert. And I was like, dude, Bleach is coming in America. I'm finally going to read it. And he was like, man, it took you long enough. Now they're finally like, they're almost done with this big arc and stuff. And I was like, oh, yeah, I read the chapter and it's really cool. And like, you're right. This is awesome. But it was very resonant. Like when I finally started to read it and experience it, and I already had that kind of, when your friends are talking
Mm.
about like this thing is great, like you want to also be part of that hype,
Mm.
especially at such a younger and impressionable age. You're like, yes, like as long as we're not hurting people, like I want to be part of this thing that you think is cool. Um, and so like I started reading it and I'm in the exact same kind of part in my life as you were talking about. I think I was a freshman in high school when I started really picking up the volumes.
Mm.
And Ichigo is as well a freshman in school. He's 15, like you were saying. Um, I was about 14, 15 years old. So it was this thing where I'm looking at this character when compared to others, like you were saying with,
Mm.
Naruto and stuff like that. And I was reading One Piece. So like with Luffy might have been around the same age. I think he was a little older, but
Mm.
the setting in Bleach is one that was more realistic.
Yeah.
as far as like he's a kid in school, you see him go to school, you see him interacting with teachers, students, his family, they go around town and interact with the people in the town, and this was something that was very relatable. And so I think that that was a big influence on my initial like draw towards that, is because like, you know, Naruto was cool, but it's kids that are, like you said, younger than us who are in a ninja school. Ninja school is not really relatable so much, you know.
Yeah.
It's very cool, but I've never been to a class where I learned how to do ninjutsu. Um, and then One Piece, you know, I loved that series, and I loved the sense of adventure, and I loved all the characters, the comedy, and the slapstick, you know, artwork sometimes. But I can't relate to being a pirate. Like those are the types of things where I would have to sit there and like use my imagination and be like, yes, I'm a pirate, I'm gonna go sail and stuff. But I'm 15, like I shouldn't really be imagining myself sailing the seven seas, lest something might be wrong with me.
Yeah.
So Ichigo is the one that represented where I was in my life. And it was so cool because I could be like, yeah, I'm in school, I have friends, I have family that I interact with in the same type of way. Like I have, you know, my smart friends and my dumb friends that we all get into our own hijinks and we have fun together. And you know, there's the girls at the school that I, you know, I have crush on, and there's, you know, the girls that I'm friends with and stuff like that. So it's very much like I felt that connection with Ichigo as a character that I did not feel with these other characters. And when thinking about it now, it's almost the same reason why a character like Spider-Man stands apart
Oh
from
yeah,
a lot of the other
definitely.
superheroes. Because Spider-Man, Peter Parker, that's what you get, is this kid that's in high school and he's balancing his superhero life with his normal high school life. He's balancing like having to go to class, and this is throughout his entire, because you follow Peter throughout high school, and maybe more easy to say for like Ultimate Spider-Man, but through high school, he goes to college and Empire University, he gets a job, he works at Daily Bugle. Eventually, with J. Michael Straczynski's run, he gets a job working at a school as a teacher and stuff like that, and then so on and so forth. But the whole time, it's all about that balance between I have
Yeah.
to protect my identity and save the people around me while working as a hero, while working as this superhero as Spider-Man to stop the villains, to stop Venom, Doc Ock, Green Goblin. But at the same time, I can't like let my personal life fall to the wayside, or else it starts bringing up questions. You know, where's Peter? Why isn't Peter ever in class and stuff like that? And it's the same reason, like same type of thing for Ichigo. Like he falls into that kind of niche of trying to keep that normal school life going while at the same time he's all of a sudden fallen back into this role of the substitute where whenever Rukia is not able to do it herself when she comes into Karakura Town. And he's kind of balancing, you know, keeping the secret from people and at the same time going out there and doing the job that he needs to do, because with this great power comes this great responsibility that he must protect Karakura Town from these monsters, the Hollows. And so I think that's one of the reasons why it is successful as it is, because it followed that formula that we've seen work with Pete Miles, with Kamala Khan in Miss Marvel, where it is that balance between the real relatable school life that your readers can sit there and either relate to right now or reminisce about being in that position, as it would be with like me reading Kamala. And then you have that fantastic idea of like, if they can do it, then like I could be a hero too. Like this is just someone just like me. You know, Ichigo, just like me, puts on his school uniform every morning and goes to school. And, you know, if he's able to protect his friends and he's able to save people, like, man, like I feel like I could do the same thing. And that really, like, coming down to it, I think that nails the reason why Bleach was so influential immediately for me, why it like grasped me so heavily when I started reading it. It's just all of those reasons, and it made it stand out so well against you know, Naruto or One Piece, or even some of the other titles I was reading at the time, like Shaman King. You know, Yo was more involved in his life as a shaman than going back and dealing with school stuff. It was like for some characters like that, it's like, I don't care about my normal life. I'm gonna go do this, like the manga calling, like I'm a shonen protagonist. I can't deal with
Yeah.
school.
Yeah, and look, I think you're 100% right there, and I think it, for me at least, like it felt like a really kind
Hmm.
of, it seems like overblown to say it, but it felt like almost like a kind of a seismic like hit in terms of like that feeling of discovering something that was kind of like you said, epic kind of superhero-ish battles, but it
Hmm.
was, I think, like it felt like a little bit more extra mature as well, and it's funny
Yeah.
saying that again, like as a 30-year-old now, compared to some of the other stuff you go on and read. But like the fact that Ichigo is like dealing with, ghosts in his hometown that are like literally killing people.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like spooky and unknown, which is of
Oh
course a
yeah.
great like, metaphor for adolescence and things like that. You got to go out and fight stuff and you're like, no, I've got no idea what I'm doing. Like I think that worked really well. But like you said, I think it was so good that he could like come home. He's got his dad and he's like, sisters that annoy him and things like that. Like he felt like really relatable. And again, it's funny because he's not like in the grand scheme of things, he probably feels more of like a progenitor to people like Deku or like
Mhm.
Tanjiro, who are kind of like more relatable, like shonen protagonists. But I think the fact that he was kind of like, given my previous exposure was either someone like Goku, or
Mhm.
like even like Naruto. The fact that he was like, oh, he's just a regular dude, like he's an exceptionally like buff like Japanese team. But given the context, like he felt like a pretty regular guy. And the fact, I think, I don't know why it was like this for me, but the fact that he was fighting with swords made it a lot easier to buy into, because it was kind of like, well, like he's not innately skilled, or he doesn't have to learn any skills
Right.
off the bat. He just kind of has like, here's a big knife, cut that thing in half. And you're kind of like, okay, it's like, it reminds me a little bit, funnily enough, of like Sailor Moon in terms of like that, like the base level of power required for him to kind of go out and perform his duties is like just low enough that you're like, yeah, that's like really relatable. Whereas like Naruto doing his like, kind of thing like that, I'm just like, I couldn't learn that, and he has to like kind of, he has to like kind of summon special powers and things like that. Whereas the idea of just kind of like getting a big sword and going off to protect your community from ghosts was just like, well, that's really cool. And like you said, it was kind of like easy to put yourself into that situation. Whereas again, like Goku is awesome, but as like a 15-year-old, you're not like, I am Goku. You're like, oh god, I wish I could be Goku, but you're not like,
Yeah.
you're not him. Whereas,
Yeah.
whereas Ichigo, you're like, oh, like he's just like me, like, oh, like again, you have to forgive some adolescents who be like, he's just like me. But, I think it was that, and the fact that like Kubo's art was just so, like, it felt so modern. Even now, like, it feels really like sharp and unique, and I think that helped it stand out, particularly given like the kind of anime that got farmed out, like to us back in the day, was kind of a bit of a mixed bag, and there was less kind of ability, I think, to kind of pick kind of niche, subgenres, like something like Demon Slayer. Who knows if that would have made it out here like 15 years ago. Whereas the fact that like you see Kubo's art, it immediately looked different to me than like
Hmm.
anything else I'd seen. It was like kind of sharp, fashionable, a little bit minimalist, and his
Hmm.
ability to kind of combine that traditional like sword fighting so well with like modern Japan just kind of was like it blew my mind, because other places like other things again like Naruto or Dragon Ball kind of had their own whole universes that they would, you have to be in that universe and you look like this and da da da. But the fact that Bleach was like, oh hey, here's like, it's the regular world, but there are also ghosts and you have to
Yeah.
fight them. This is kind of like, whoa, like, it kind of just really blew my mind. And the other thing that really attracted me to it, which I think is touched on, is like Bleach's treatment of its female characters was kind of like at the start, Rukia was kind of like a female character I'd never seen before in any kind of like shown anime. Like she was, and again, she kind of gets a bit like screwed over in the long run. But at least when she shows up originally, like she's competent, she's no nonsense, and she's also not like a love interest for Ichigo. Like she's
Hmm.
kind of just like, hey, I'm just here. And I found like their friendship and camaraderie really endearing, and it was just it felt really refreshing, because I wasn't really used to seeing that in any kind of anime, that kind of, like opposite sex, like platonic,
Hmm.
friendship and kind of like back and forth. And Rukia herself, the way she's designed is like, she's just looks like a normal human woman. Like it's not, over the top fan service or anything like that. Which is not to say
Right.
Bleach doesn't do that, because Lord knows it does later on. But like with Rukia, at least she just felt like a really real person. And so I think when we eventually got to that arc where they have to go save her, it was such a huge draw, because you're like, oh my god, like one of your friends has been kidnapped. Like you got to go
Yes.
save them, and it just works so well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, 100%. Like, and even if you look at some of these other popular, as much as we love them, these other popular manga and anime series that we talked about, the female characters in Dragon Ball Z, for instance, none of the main like fighting characters are female. It's all males and different aliens and stuff. So like for instance, you're introduced back in Dragon Ball to Chi-Chi, but her role is then relegated to just being the housewife eventually.
Yeah.
And Bulma has a much better role, I think, than Chi, because she is at home, but she's doing everything with Capsule Corp and creating things to help everyone in what they're doing. But to have an entire series that lasted as long as it did, and to only have a couple of main female characters, and you have Videl come in later, who doesn't do that much, but like it's kind of a little disappointing. No matter how much I love Dragon Ball Z, I can't you don't want to overlook that kind of thing. And then like Naruto, the main character in Sakura, as far as a female goes, she's looked at by Naruto as like that he's pining after her. And then it's the same, like Hinata comes in and Hinata wants to be with Naruto, and then you have like I think even Ino had her crush on whichever other character. So it's that same, and I understand like with them, they're adolescents, and like when you're that age, most of your interaction with the other sex, or like whichever sex you are attracted to, is like, oh man, like I would love to kiss that person and stuff like that. So like it kind of makes sense, but a lot of characters don't recover from that, even when it gets into the later years of Naruto. Like Sakura, unfortunately, like doesn't have the best development of everyone. But Bleach does a really great job of, and once it does go into the next arc where they introduce greater world here, they introduce Soul Society and all that. Bleach does such a fantastic job of introducing characters of all shapes and sizes, all genders, and all kinds of stuff. So you have like when you're introduced to the Gote 13, you get a bunch of admirals and vice admirals who are, or captains and vice captains. I'm thinking in like One Piece terms here. Sorry, I was just reading and I was like, yeah, Fleet Admiral Sengoku. And but once you get into there, you get all the captains and vice captains, and there's people from all over the place. You even have someone who's a freaking dog, like
like captain's so good.
So that was something like that really intrigued me, was, and this is something that like for me it's really a button that when pressed, like I'm like, yes, like organization in a series. Like if you can sit there and make a flowchart of the characters and you're like, I don't know, it sounds really stupid, but that's something that really draws me in, where it's like as soon as they introduce the Gote 13, once they introduce the Gote 13, and I'm like, this is so cool. There's like this hierarchy of these different people, and it was really cool because you get, in the first 7 or 8 volumes of the series, Ichigo, and that's really it. And like, Rukia. And so to that perspective, Rukia is the Soul Reaper, like, and Ichigo's just kind of the stand-in, and she's calling the shots of like helping him how to do stuff. And then you're introduced to like Urahara, and you're like, well, this guy's even more powerful. Like, what is going on? Like, who are these people? Where do they come from? And then once you get into Soul Society, it opens up this big world of like, oh my gosh, like Ichigo seemed like he was this strong, kind of badass guy, but there's this whole system of people, of Soul Reapers that are, or Shinigami, who are much like stronger, much more powerful, much more developed as far as their strength and their abilities go than Ichigo is. And it was so interesting to follow this, and I love this systematic thing where you get like, with each of these characters, like, okay, well, there's 13 companies in the Gote 13, and there's going to be a captain. Supposedly there will be a captain and a vice captain in everyone. There's different seats beneath that. And then you start getting introduced to like their powers, and at this point everyone's going to have a shikai, everyone's going to have a bankai, and this was so interesting to see this type of thing, because then you have that idea of like, any one of these characters can at some point when fighting, we could find out about their shikai, or we can find out about their bankai, and it's something to kind of look forward to. And you feel the same way with Ichigo, like, oh my gosh, like, what is his power? Like, what will we see from him? And this is where, because this is going to change later, but this is where you kind of have everyone on that level playing field. As far as powers go, you don't have that one like, oh well, Goku and Vegeta are way above literally everyone else, type of thing. Like it's a good level playing field where the genre of characters that we have, the Soul Reapers here, as opposed to like ninjas or pirates or whatever, are all on kind of that like equal playing field, and most of them can reach the same power level, and their powers are not all about strength. Some of them are about different things, about healing and stuff like that. So it made it very interesting, and it made it something where I could sit there and discuss with friends, like, oh my gosh, like, what do you like? Literally for years, my friend and I would sit there like discussing what we thought Kenpachi's release was going to be. Like, it was so exciting to be able to talk about these things. Just debates and like discussion, and when something got revealed, the excitement behind it. But also, like, so the organization factor, that was something that I really liked. It just seems really like organized in my head, and I like the way that worked. But also, like you mentioned, when Ichigo has to go save Ruki, and it's like he has to protect his friend. And this is something I've mentioned before on Facebook. The reason I think that Ichigo is, until things kind of go sideways, is probably the best of the shonen protagonists, or one of the best, is because his motivation is all about protecting his friends. Like, his motivation is not about, I want to become stronger because I want to be the leader of the Soul Society. It's not about like him reaching a certain level to obtain status, or to obtain a treasure, or to obtain whatever it is. Referring back to, as much as I love these characters, Naruto is always driven by wanting to be Hokage, and Luffy is driven by wanting to be the Pirate King and finding the treasure. But Ichigo's motivation was all about, in that, similar with the Spider-Man stuff that I was talking about, great responsibility, great power, or great power begat great responsibility. It's like using that responsibility to help the people in your life. And when all of a sudden one of his friends that he's made, who's become a really important part of his life, is threatened, he's left with no choice but to say, like, I need to protect her. I need to go rescue her. And it's the same throughout the series. Like, the motivation for most of it is, I need to defeat this bad person, defeat the evil guy, because they're threatening my friends, my family, and my home, my way of life, in general. And that was really one of the things that goes back to the relatability factor. Like, it's something where, oh my gosh, like, I have friends, I have family, and I too know what it would feel like if they're threatened. Like, I've been the friend that one of my friends when we were growing up was made fun of for a speech impediment. And I've been the guy that stood up and was like, no, like, you don't say that kind of thing. Like, protecting my friends however I need to and however I can, because I care about them. So that was something where it was like relatable for me also with Ichigo, and what made him stand out and what made this series stand out, even though by this point we're getting away from that grounded reality of Karakura Town, and we're heading into the Serete and being in Soul Society at this point, and being introduced to the much more fantastical elements, I guess you could say, of the series.
Yeah, and I think you're right in that, like, that's why the first 21-ish volumes work so well, because you have that really good, relatable, like, world building, and it takes a while, but you get there, and then when you have to leave, like, it's kind of like, it feels like they're embarking on an adventure, but because you've spent like time with his friends, like, you can believe him, like, going into bat for them. Like, it's not just kind of like, oh, they're my friends, I guess I have to go help them, like, in the second volume or something. Like, this is after we spent a lot of time with them, and them kind of volunteering to go help him like kind of means a lot as well. And I think again, referring back to what I said about like Ichigo's and Rukia's relationship, like the fact that, like you said, he just wants to protect his friends. Like he's not going after Rukia because it's like a romantic thing or anything like that. He's just like, no, she's my friend. Like, so I got to go help her. And he knows that he's like, and again, like you said with the power stuff, he knows that he's way out of his own depth. But the fact that he and his friends kind of still like suit up and they're like, okay, we got to go like save her. It reminds me of like the kind of the best, not even just shonen, but like the best kind of anime series, like I guess does it as well, where it's like set like a crazy objective for the protagonist, and they're like, okay, so how are they going to get there? And like you know that like maybe academically, oh, it's the story, like we'll probably rescue her. But like I have no idea how this is going to happen. Like what could occur? And the fact that I really like Soul Society as an antagonist because it wasn't like, oh, I don't know, she gets kidnapped by a group of hollows or something, and so it's like they're obviously, evil. It's fine. Like he's kind of going to fight the guys who you think are the good guys, and so it's kind of like, oh, so are these guys good guys? Are some of them good guys? Are some of them bad guys? Why is that the case? And I really liked that you would constantly have these shifting perspectives on the different captains and vice captains in terms of like Kenpachi is a great example where you're kind of like the way he's drawn and the way he behaves, you're kind of coded to think like, oh, he's bad news, he's like a shithead. But like he turns out to be like a pretty good guy in the long run. But then like crazy evil scientist guy is kind of like that perfect gray area of like, he's never against Soul Society, but you just kind of like, oh, we're on the same side as him. Like that doesn't feel right. And I really liked that, they could shift the Soul Society captains from kind of like antagonist to protagonist kind of back and forth. And especially with people like Hitsuyuga and Renji, who are like just good dudes. You're like, oh, this isn't right. They shouldn't be fighting. Like, why can't Renji team up with Ichigo? Kind of like, they both want to help Rukia kind of feeling. And I think you're 100% right. I really liked, at least at this point, before they started getting a bit crazy, like the power balancing. This is what I was thinking, comparing it to Hunter x Hunter in my mind. Like, even though Bleach came out after Hunter x Hunter and JoJo's, in terms of like my own experience, it's the first time I had experienced an anime or manga where there was like power limits that felt like they'd been kind of hard set, and therefore it was up to the protagonists or the like combatants to think their way through fights. It wasn't just who, like, again, being brought up on Dragon Ball Z, it wasn't just like, oh, well, I assume you can get the biggest sword in the world and like, smash everyone with it. It was like, okay, so he can maybe get one power level higher, and everybody else has all these powers that you don't know. And I really like the creativity. Like I always love that guy. I can never remember his name, but he's the one who has his shikai, I think it is, like doubles the weight of your sword, and it like turns his like sword into like a kind of crook.
Yeah.
The idea is like when he hits you, it doubles the weight, and so it's like eventually he like puts you down on all fours and just like cuts your head off. And like that was just such a the idea that something like that was it was such a creative and cool way of doing it. But I really liked that it was also limited. Whereas like again, compared to something like Naruto or Dragon Ball, where people could like learn new techniques, or like it was as it went on, kind of like a more narrative propensity to be like, I'm doing this here to before seen thing, and then unfortunately Bleach kind of does end up in that point. But at least at Soul Society point, it felt kind of like you said, it felt kind of really good in terms of like, oh, shit, we don't know anyone's limits. I liked that. Like the captains were also kind of like antagonistic towards each other, so they didn't tell each other their own powers. And it puts you again, it reminds me a lot now of like Nen and Stans, where it's kind of like knowing the person's power is like half the battle. Once you know what their power is, you can try and think a way around it. And like, I really love that. Funny enough, I think the first YouTube video I ever watched was Kenpachi versus Towson, because I had like someone like be like, this is the greatest anime battle of all time. And I was like, oh, what's this? And then like watching Kenpachi kind of just be like I'm just going to like grab this sword so I can see you kind of thing, which is kind of like a, oh my God, he's that classic kind of, he's in a position he can't get out of. How's he going to do it? But instead of just like pulling out, oh, I have a power that lets me negate your power, he's like, well, I'll just do this. And you're like, oh shit, like that's crazy. So I thought that was really, really good. And it kind of I distinctly remember talking to some friends about it, and I was like, you gotta watch Bleach. It's not like Dragon Ball Z at all. The powers don't go over the top. Like there's power feeling. And I kind of had to eat those words in the end. But like I really liked that it was kind of, I really love what they did with Ichigo's Bankai as well. It was such a perfect choice for him, but it was great to have like a main character who's like his power wasn't like this all powerful thing. It was just like,
Yeah.
oh, he just gets really, really fast, essentially. And I really loved, I think probably like him versus Byakuya, like it's just probably like one of the best fights to me in anime, even though it hasn't like aged amazingly well. It was just so cool to kind of like see. It felt like Ichigo believably got to that kind of like level, and for him to kind of then go toe to toe to like rescue like his friend, it was just kind of, it felt like this really believable, built on, earned journey. Whereas again before, stuff I'd seen or read kind of was just didn't have that kind of same like earned feeling, and because like you said, you have that connection to him, it just
Mm-hmm.
felt like this monumental, like, oh my god, like this is so real. And then when like he jumps up and saves her, and he's got his like and shit like that. And it's like, oh, this is just, it was just too cool. And I might also add the openings as well were just like absolute fire, so good, and it helped contribute to that like really cool modern feeling of it. Was
Yeah.
like like all the images drawn from like the color spreads and stuff, but it kind of felt like you were watching this really cool new unbefore seen thing. And I think the other thing, again, people will laugh like looking at stuff like Demon Slayer nowadays, but back then, again, for someone who kind of grew up on Dragon Ball and older anime, like Bleach looked really new as well. And it felt, again, going back watching some of the episodes, it's kind of it's not the best animated show, but at least some of the episodes, like they felt like really fresh, like HD anime, kind of stuff like
Yeah.
that. And that whole Soul Society arc from I'll live and die on that hill of like 1 to 21 volumes, just like or the first like season before they get to the first sort of filler was just kind of like it's just spectacular. And I would still heartily recommend it to anyone, but I might recommend maybe they stop there or not.
No,
I guess that goes into the next bit, right? How do you feel about it?
so the middle part I also love, because I feel like the middle part being the visored Espada, Hueco Mundo, all that stuff. I loved all of that because I felt like we had established this power limit for the characters, but there was something going on with Ichigo from early in the series that was definitely different, and it was something that was unanswered, and that was, of course, looking at the the Hollow Mask and what was going on with that, just for reference there. And I felt like when you like after the Soul Society arc had finished, and after they rescued Rukia, and he goes back to Karakura Town, and it's like, oh, life is back to normal. All of a sudden, you're introduced to this new guy. Shinji comes walking in upside down, and it was this revelation of like, because at first it's like, who the heck is this guy? Like, who's this weird looking dude with the like curtain cut hair and the walking upside down and the weird smile? Who is this guy? And you soon learn about the Visored, these people who also have a similar ability to the thing that's been kind of like in the back of Ichigo's mind. Like, why can he pull this hollow mask down? What is this? Like, what is going on here? And they do well to introduce kind of the next level almost of the strength, but it's something that it's not exactly like, oh, this person is stronger inherently than anyone who cannot pull out these hollow abilities. It's just an additional ability that they have, because there are these visored who would not be as strong, but it's going back to, like you were saying, techniques and stuff, where every character's their abilities manifest in a different type of technique, and it's not necessarily just like a power level where their strength is greater, but it's something where they have another ability that they can use thanks to this power, whether it be from their Zanpakuto or whether it be from their visor, their mask. So I really enjoyed seeing that, and you get to see Ichigo kind of go through additional training to master, so to say,
Mm.
this before he's sent off into his next quest, which, you know, looking back, it is kind of redundant because it's him having to rescue this time Orihime.
Yes.
But again, it's the same kind of like, well, I need to protect my friends, but then you find out like, oh, it's not a new threat, it's the same threat, and he's just continuing in his plans. So from there, it continues to make sense for me, and this brings us out all the way to volume, what, 47, 46 or something, before 48 volumes. Sorry, my thing got unplugged. Yeah. 48 volumes before the end of Hueco Mundo and that big arc. And I really liked it there too, because now in the early arc of the series, like when they're in Town, the antagonist that Ichigo was always fighting against were the Hollows. And when you get to Soul Society, it's less about the Hollows and it's all about them meeting these captains. But like you said, there's, you know, some of these captains, most of them are good guys. And it was just the situation at hand, like all these twists and turns and the betrayals and stuff, made it seem like a lot of them might not be good people. They might be the villains and stuff. But now you're introduced to this group that is definitely not so good. Like these are the bad guys. This is the next step for the Hollows, and this I think was an excellent way to meet that established power level that we have of the of the Soul Society, you know, all the captains and stuff that have their Bankais, and Ichigo, who's learned how to do these things, and you're met with the other side of it, which is you know, the Hollows being kind of evolved into more of a humanoid form, and becoming these Arrancar, and the, you know, another, you know, like I said, the stupid like hierarchies and stuff that really kind of make me excited. You get you know that there's 10 Espada. You're like, all right, the 10 Espada, like, oh my gosh. And they even like play with it to like make revelation and stuff about who the number one and the strongest is and stuff. And it's, you know, you get to see Ichigo fight, and Ichigo and his gang, which in typical shonen style is now made up of more friends who he gained along the way, going up against these Arrancar, who it's basically the Soul Reaper equivalent of Hollows, and using their abilities. And you have different characters there who have their own techniques that differentiate them from each other. And now, like, they're having to fight against each other. And it just, you have another established power level this time for the antagonists. And this was super exciting for me. And you get to learn more about the world and what's going on here. And it dives deeper into things that we were kind of already established in the previous arcs, but now you get to see the other side of it. So I really love where it goes from here. And I think that, like, you can definitely make the argument that they're breaking this established power level and stuff, but I think like they do well to kind of just add another layer without just tearing the roof off. You know, Dragon Ball Z style. They're not necessarily like over 9,000 yet. We're not at Ultra Instinct here. You know, it's something that, because it's also attainable by most of the cast of this series, aside from those who are not, you know, Soul Reapers or Arrancar. But it's once they start going past this is where the issues start developing. And also, a side note, coming from a Spanish background, like my mom being from South America and my grandparents speaking like almost only Spanish growing up and stuff with me, seeing a manga that like had characters that were based in the Spanish language and like these abilities, where even though Kubo takes his liberties with translation, he like uses words that he thinks will sound cool and tells you that they mean something different, which is fine. Like, I just thought it was cool. I was like, this is really cool. And I really was always attracted to the character of Chad, because he had that, like myself, he was half Hispanic, and his ability was, you know, something that he would address in Spanish. I just thought it was so cool. It was just a side note there that kind of impacted me just a teensy bit. But after this arc, it starts to get to the point where, like, what? Like, what's going on with these powers, with these abilities? Like, there doesn't seem to be as much of a limit. And the thing that's kind of crazy is they end the Hueco Mundo arc on a note that's very, very final. You know, things kind of come to a close, and I think that it's definite that the series shouldn't end at that point because there was still a couple of questions, but a couple of questions left unanswered, a few plot lines left unwoven, does not equal another 20 plus volumes or almost 30 volumes of material. And I think that really, this is where most people, all people really start to say this is the downfall of Bleach. This is the fall from grace.
Yeah.
Once they start going into the Fullbring arc and then into the 1,000-Year Blood War story, it starts to fall apart. And I think it's not because the ideas were not solid, because you're thrust into this, again, something that's kind of been hinted at with the Quincy. From the beginning, when you're introduced to your first Quincy with Uryu, you already know that the Quincy don't necessarily like the Soul Reapers. You don't know why, and you don't really know much about them, but you're told like that they're not really there anymore. So it's kind of hinted at, but I feel like it's something that could have been made into a much more concise story arc rather than taking, 6 volumes to get Ichigo his abilities back, but different. And then having an entire alphabet of Quincy warriors that you've never heard of before, that for all intents and purposes shouldn't even exist at this point, according to what they've told you. And I get it, like, lie and fabricate stuff to make the story interesting, but like at the same time, what? And like, I read, when I read the last part, I read it all in basically one chunk, because I read the Fullbring arc and I read the beginning of the 1,000-Year Blood War arc, and I fell off at initially, not for any specific reason, but eventually it was like, I know this is the last arc. I'm just gonna wait. Like, I'm just gonna wait for it to be done, because I'm tired of following. This was another thing about Bleach, and a lot of series are kind of guilty of this. Is it's a lot better in chunks, especially like once it gets into the fights of the arc. Because, for instance, the fight between Ulquiorra and Ichigo in the middle of the Hueco Mundo arc took so long, and it was such a cool fight. But when we were sitting there and like every chapter seems like it's just one swing of the sword, it's like, come on, let's go.
Sure. I feel like even in the anime, I'm pretty sure, like, because it became like a regular ritual for me, like studying through university. Like, I'd be like, oh well, at the end of every like week, like, I like worked in retail, so I'd be like, finish up my job, working on Friday night, go home, and I'd like watch the new Bleach episode. And I just remember getting more and more irate because towards the end, it was like a full quarter of the episode was a recap of the previous episode. And I was just like, why are you doing this, guys? It's already so like ballooned out so much. Why are you doing this to me? And I think it was, I just really fell into that kind of trap of just like going on and on and on. And it felt particularly like egregious because those first 60 or so episodes are just like packed, and they just hit so well. And then in the anime, it's like they experimented with like filler arcs, which were just the worst. Or like the worst, even worse for me, was like when they were in the, and I apologize for my Spanish pronunciation being just horrible, in the Hueco Mundo arc, like you'd have 10 episodes of canon, 10 episodes of filler, and it would just like, it just grind the pace down to like nothing. And it was just so frustrating because like it felt like you could see all these different avenues. Like I remember getting really pissed as well when they revealed that Orihime's power is like, it doesn't do anything. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it's like she used to have this cool like time reversing power, and that's why she gets captured. And you're like, oh yeah, makes sense. Like makes sense. And then it was like, oh no, her power is actually just it's shit. And you're like, what? Like it got hand waved away like so weirdly. And it really just did my head in because I was like, but you could have had the story, like it would have worked fine, but they kind of just like excessively damseled her. And I swear to God, there was like a run of episodes where she just said nothing but like Kurosaki-kun, like that was all she was saying. It's just like it just drove me mad because it's like it's like when you have a friend who's like they're a good guy and if they put in the effort like they'll succeed at what they're trying and they're just kind of half-assing and you're like no just come on like just pull and I think like I was reflecting on this earlier today like I think a lot of people, and this is making me sound like a truly old man, but like a lot of kids don't know how good they got it these days with series like Attack on Titan or My Hero Academia or Demon Slayer, just doing an arc and then stopping and then like giving it time to breathe. So if you want to go and watch My Hero now from episode 1, you've got like 80, 90 episodes of just like pure quality and there's no filler. Like I think there's like one recap episode of each of it every season, but like there's nothing like that. There's no fat. Whereas like with Bleach, One Piece, Naruto, like the filler arcs, the filler episodes just drag it down so much. And I'm so glad anime has kind of like reached a point where like they figured out that people are just happy to wait like a year or like 8 months or however long it is just to have a good season and then put like the money into that animation rather than just like, oh, I got to have an episode of Bleach this week forever. Kind of thing like that because it just kills the quality of the show. And particularly with I found filler arcs as well, like the Bound filler arc, just like and amazingly it felt like the best one later on, and that's just how bad the filler got. But like the Bound filler arc where Ichigo comes back and then he just like forgets how to use his Bankai because it would break their filler arc if he could just whoop the vampires. So he just spends like episodes trying to remember. And I remember the other two ones that really killed me was like they did one with that guy who he's like the Soul Reaper that helps them and his Shikai is like the scalpel and it can absorb people's pain. And they did a whole filler episode about him baking a cake, and it was just like it just no. And then I think and then after that they had like a beach episode. I was like, you can't do this to me. It was just so frustrating. And I think like you said, I really liked a lot of the Hueco Mundo stuff. Like I love the idea of like maybe the Soul Society captains, they're all good, but what if we had like their evil versions? You're just like, oh shit, how is Aizen going to go up against like Soul Society? Oh god, he's actually got I prepared these earlier 10 evil like badasses. And again, like Kubo's character design, like Grimjaw is just like he's just so cool. He feels like a real kind of rival for Ichigo. Like he was really awesome. I wasn't a huge fan of Urukiora just because I prefer Grimjaw being more like aggro. But like there was a lot of really good design stuff in there, and I really liked the look of the world. It was good, and I could kind of get me past the we're doing this plot again because again they sold to me well oh okay like Aizen's kidnapped someone, all right we'll go after them kind of thing like that. But it just kind of like I couldn't tell you where there's no moment that I can say this is the moment that it definitely started to go downhill, but it just kind of felt like there was just maybe like a little something missing. Everything started going out longer, and I think something that's probably worth considering is like the human element, which is Kubo himself. He's like obviously he's like a phenomenal artist, but because of the way the manga industry works, it seems very unusual apart from like couple of pairings. Like the only ones I can think off the top of my head are like Dr. Stone and Death Note and Obata and Oba's like other Bakuman, other team ups. Is that because like as the writer and the artist, like there's such phenomenal pressure, especially if you're like one of the top 3 selling series, just to like keep it going. So I do always wonder like what would have he done, what he would have done differently, or whether it would have been better for him if he could kind of reach that Togashi level and just be like, look, you know what? Like, or Miro just be like, look, I'm taking a break. I'm going to take a break for a year, and then I'm going to come back, and I'm going to be re-energized, and like it's going to be good. Because I feel like, again, it felt like back in the 2000s that like just, I mean, it just wasn't the done thing. Like people were kind of like, no, you must just keep drawing forever, forever, forever. And I'm sure that must have weighed on him. And you can see in the art like as well, like compare like the first couple of pages of Bleach, even though his style's still a bit like, unrefined, like there's so much detail and it's like, there's so much energy in it. And as you get to kind of towards the end, it's just a bit more like, he's still good, but it's a bit more kind of by the numbers. And it kind of feels like, again, he's, like you were saying, like the power levels, it kind of feels like he's kind of reaching more just for the like, this is kind of convenient. Like, I just need someone to win this fight. Like, this is the thing that happens. And you're like, oh, okay. And it just kind of like, it really annoyed me because I really like the idea of like a bunkai being like something that people pull out, like, when it's like, okay, it's time to get serious, you pull out the bunkai. But then like it literally got to the point where it's like, oh, here's a fight, like bunkai, like straight away. And I understand, like, you've got to kind of keep increasing the stakes. But to me, that was emblematic of like the fact that everyone just started defaulting to like this like last resort kind of, final power level from the start of all the fights. As the series goes on, just kind of shows that like he's trying to up the ante, but doesn't. There's just something about it that's not quite working. And I agree with you with the visor powers. Like I felt like that was a good escalation. That felt earned. Like it felt like a good way to do it. But especially like as the series goes on, and it's like here's like another hollow power plus 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 plus. And it also felt like Ichigo got kind of more and more. He started off as this very relatable dude who kind of felt like, oh, like he got pulled into this by accident. Yeah, maybe there's some hints, like maybe his dad was kind of involved in this. Like, I don't know. But like as the series goes on, it kind of feels more and more like he's kind of being funneled into this like chosen one narrative where it's like Ichigo has like he's got all these powers because he's this special person. Because this, and that pulls him further away from that kind of like relatability factor where it's like, well, he's not relatable. Like this guy who has these crazy, crazy good powers because it's just like who he is. So I think, yeah, and I think they also jettisoned a lot of the side cast as well, in favor of Soul Society and, as I like to call him, Mr. Protagonist number 2, Hitsuyuga, the tenth, the young boy captain, who I think started regularly like topping popularity polls ahead of Ichigo, and it was. I don't know. I'd be interested to know if it was editorially mandated, but it definitely felt like as the story went on, he got like bigger and bigger like pieces of the story pie, or they kind of found ways to like put him in because obviously it's like he was popular with the young male audience, where it's like, hey, if you're 12, here's a guy who looks like you, and he's a total badass. To the point that I think like the 4th or 3rd movie is like entirely about him.
Yeah.
Well, so I think it was. It just felt like such a shame because it was like, like I feel like what's his name, good old Krennic in Rogue One, where I'm like, we were this close, like so close.
I think
the power levels.
There's a lot of the issues that wouldn't be fixed by this, but the mass amount of like random fillers shoved in there, if they were to like re-release the anime as like a Kai type thing and just shed all the filler, or even if they like reanimated, or like One Piece has been doing special episodes that are like condensed versions of the larger arcs and stuff. I think that it would be really nice, considering they're bringing it back with this new anime and they are doing this final arc as a new series, which obviously they're doing it now after it's been done for years. There's not going to be any filler, which that's plus number one. Like that's a good thing. But they could go back and like the anime ended back in like 2012, so it's a whole nother audience now of people who are going to be watching it, like, and it would be beneficial to everyone for them to re-release it in some format, do specials, do a Kai version, whatever you want to do that could fix the issues that the series had, that could fix the pacing for a bunch of the arcs by taking out those fillers and then kind of like making sure that the fights are well paced and not dragged on and stuff like that. So I feel like that's something that could help and fix it, but there's no news that that's anything that's going to happen. All we know is we are getting that final arc, because the series ended with the Fullbring arc, and it was like, oh, Ichigo gets his powers back and cut. But there's this whole other story arc that goes on beyond that of the Quincy's versus the Soul Reapers. So, like I said, number one, I think the anime will have a benefit over the previous anime stuff of not having filler. But I think that they could use this as an opportunity to streamline that arc, to streamline the Quincy arc, and contain it into a limited amount of episodes so that these fights don't seem to just drag on forever. And it's not going to fix the issues of like Ichigo's ridiculous power creep from this point on. Which, and to say for a second, like the powers he develops, it's not that it doesn't make sense, like what he gets, if you know, for my opinion, like everything that he learns and everything that he does, it makes sense. But the thing that sucks is like at this point there's nobody else like him out there. Like there's no one else that has the same type of abilities. So at this point he's no longer comparable to anyone. You have him set on this pedestal by himself, and he's, even then, like, and to be fair, and this is a positive note, he still is not the strongest person in the series. By the end of it, he's not the end all be all of everyone, but he is set aside from every other character because he has basically every power possible. He has the Soul Reaper power, he has the Hollow power, he has the Quincy power, he has Fullbring, like everything together, making him this strange amalgamation of like he's just unequivocally strong. So it kind of, it was a surprise when you're like, oh, and he's not even the strongest. So, but that was cool. That was nice. But they could fix all of this. Like that's not going to be able to be fixed. But they can fix the pacing. They can fix like letting things drag on too long, focusing on stupid things for too long, and just streamline that last season. And I doubt it will be this short, but like it'd be great to just have a normal like 26 episode season, wrap it up. Give us a concise look at everything, and it's nice because it answers all the questions. It gives you answers about the feud between the Quincy and the Soul Reapers. It gives you more information about like characters we've been wondering about, like Ichigo's dad and stuff like that, and then brings you to this conclusion where you have a, you know, typical in shonen fashion, a flash forward where they show you these characters as they've grown a little bit, and you know, where are they now and everything like that. So I'm hoping that it's successful. I'm hoping that it does well enough for people to say that, you know, and it was really worth it for them to animate this. This really like did it justice. Like that's what I'm hoping. And you've mentioned before outside of this video, with the new animation, for it to look nice and clean and stuff with this new type of animation, high definition, it'll be something that's really beautiful. And then of course we have to look forward to Burn the Witch, which I'm very excited for. Because we were kind of given this backdoor into another side of the Bleach world, and like introducing this entire different division of stuff that we didn't know existed, but when you think about it, makes sense, you know. So it's very exciting, and I don't know what they're gonna come up with for that. I know they're doing like a short anime series and a short run of a manga and stuff, but if Kubo's behind it and he still has ideas to get out there, I'm excited. Like I'm excited to see what he comes up with. I'm excited to see how he expands on this world. You know, is this going to be a sequel, a prequel, a sidequel? You know, what is going to happen here?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's, like I was saying before, I really hope that kind of the way the industry works, obviously it's still like a, you know, like a real full-on industry. But hopefully the way it works, and he's kind of like a bit of a veteran now, even if he wants to, like, say, you know, a season or a couple of OVAs of Burn the Witch and then take a couple of years, come back and do some more, he'll have the freedom to kind of do that, and actually can develop it. And I think you can tell, like, when creators enjoy making something, it's a lot better. kind of, when they can end it on their own terms and run it on their own terms. Doesn't always make it better because sometimes they can indulge their worst aspect, but like you can feel they enjoy it a lot more. And I think it's been really interesting because even though Bleach was one of the big three, and people are kind of always obsessed with like who are the new big three kind of things like that. Like it, I don't think people really realize like how much it sold. Like I think it is still, I'm pretty sure it's still within the top 10 selling like best manga of like all time, which is pretty phenomenal considering like it's still like it's ended for a while. It hasn't really kind of had the same lasting impact. To give you an idea, like it was like this unbelievable juggernaut. And I think kind of for people like, again, to sound old, for people like us who were around at the time, like it really did feel like yes, it was one of the big three. I think now, kind of in 2020, obviously One Piece is still going and Boruto's around, but like people still kind of like Naruto is still referenced a lot in popular culture. It's still kind of like it has that pop culture cache. I think that Bleach doesn't really have, and One Piece like has kind of gone from strength to strength and has gotten proper Western exposure, so it's kind of out there more. But like if you ask like a teen today, like, oh, have you heard of Bleach or something? They're probably like, huh, what? If you ask them about One Piece or Naruto, they probably would know what they are. So I think this like new anime, even though it's at the final arc, hopefully it does like get people interested in being able to come back and watch the original stuff, or at least like, dear God, like someone in Crunchyroll just make a playlist that, like I said, just cuts out all the filler so you people can just watch it without having to like do their own researches to figure out when to start and stop different episodes. But I think what's been really interesting as well, like if you look at both yours and I's reaction and other people who kind of grew up with it, is that it still obviously commands like a really passionate fan base and a really passionate response, because even though I haven't watched it in like, oh God, like I don't want to say a decade, but it's a long time ago now. At least 8 years I haven't watched it for. The fact that they're like, oh, we're going to do some more anime, it really kind of hits that nostalgia kind of sweet spot and makes you remember all the good things that you really enjoyed about the series. And I think hopefully it speaks to Shonen Jump's like their kind of commitment to the series, or their feelings, or they're guessing their feelings about it, that they are doing these like anniversary kind of celebrations. They're kind of gauging, I think, are people still into it, and the fact that they committed to the anime, like it, I think it maybe says more than we realize that, like you said, like 8 years after the last episode, this isn't just like, oh, here we're animating like a one-shot OVA. Like they're going to do a full, proper arc, things like that. It might be testing the waters, or maybe Kubo like kind of got it out of them in terms of like, in exchange for Burn the Witch. But I think the fact that they're doing that really speaks kind of volumes to the, the popularity of it. And it's still like, I'm guaranteed if you go to any bookstore, and you go to the manga section, like there's a bit of One Piece, a bit of Naruto, and there's still a bit of Bleach, kind of in there. Because it is such a good, like, I would still have no hesitation handing the first volume to someone saying, look, read this. If you've never read manga before, have a read of this, because it's that kind of great middle ground of like something different, something familiar, something unique, something, like that you still can kind of really easily lock into and get behind. So I do really hope they do a good job. And I do, like we've said, like, outside this chat before, it would be great if they could, as we say, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, like, or Dragon Ball Z Kai, like, Naruto, One Piece, or and Bleach, and kind of give those a really good shonen series, or even, like Hunter x Hunter 2011 style, like just kind of say, we've got all this material now, let's just like do a really solid job of animating it and pacing it. Because I can imagine, again, like, Bleach, Naruto, One Piece, each of a couple of hundred episodes of just like really excellent, solid animation would just be, they'd all be fantastic. But I think Bleach kind of, I think it kind of gets shat on like so much by people who's like, it's obviously the worst kind of the big three, which I think it's kind of like, it's like when you come from somewhere that maybe isn't like the greatest place in the world, but it's like, you're protective of it because you're like, hey, I can insult Bleach, but like, don't you insult Bleach. Only I can insult it because I love it. Whereas, you don't love it, you're being me. But I think it would be really cool if people kind of even if they don't end up, like loving the whole series. And to be fair, again, it does kind of go off towards the end there. But even if it gets people to read those first 21 volumes, see that kind of, the whole Soul Society arc in anime and kind of understand as to why, back in the day that this was this huge thing. And, like the fact that I could be talking, off my head here, but I think in some ways it has also, like Bleach has also kind of helped push a little bit in terms of setting up anime series where you've got this kind of like My Hero Academia and ones like that where you've got protagonists who are kind of like in the current world with fantastic powers and doing things like that. It felt like it kind of broke a bit of that ground away from Dragon Ball in terms of like you've got this kind of set aside world and we're going on this big quest. It just felt like it was something so completely different that I'd like to think it opened the doors for kind of other shonen to kind of we'll try something different with this. And it just felt like something so new and exciting at the time. I just that didn't sound good.
Oh, I think my wife opened the door without realizing that the alarm was still activated.
It's the I haven't read enough One Piece alarm going off finally. I'm sorry. But yeah, so I think I think I'm just like this Uniqlo shirt that I have. When Uniqlo did their Shonen Jump line, there was only one Bleach shirt compared to like 50 Naruto ones and One Piece got its own line and stuff like that. So it definitely is the dark horse. Mm-hmm. But I think if anyone's watching this, and they're young and they haven't read it, or even if they're older and they haven't read it, I think it's definitely worth it because again, that first box set or first kind of 60 episodes, I just I'd still solid gold shonen, and even beyond that, it's still pretty good. It's just like you say, the wheels come off a little bit towards the end, but hopefully with the anime they'll have a chance to maybe make some corrections, or Kubo will have some input and say, okay, well, let's do this a little bit different maybe this way, and we can kind of get like a good, like a good comic ending to the series, and it can get the end that it deserves rather than. I think didn't they give him like 3 chapters to wrap it all up in as well, like when he got cancelled, like which is really kind of really rough considering where it was at the time, where it had been, in terms of like the big 3, getting like 3 like you're done, 3 chapters to wrap it up, pretty brutal.
Oh, I don't know about that. I was because I had mentioned before I fell off and I wasn't reading it regularly, and it wasn't until maybe a month after it finished that I had been informed that it was finished, and then I was like, oh, and I immediately jumped on and just went through the entire arc and read it at once. So I'm not sure if he had any like limitation to time and stuff, like how long he had to wrap it up. But I know it did go from the final battle and jump over to it ended, and then you have, like I was saying, like the time skip, and they're like, oh, this is what everyone's up to. So I don't know if maybe that was where that was. I don't know. I was kind of out of the game at that moment, so to say.
So what do you think? Well, I was going to say, Riley, what do you think keeps you coming back to Bleach? Because I know there are some series that I've kind of, I've read in the past, or, I've watched and I've been like, that was cool, but I haven't really felt like the need to go back to it. Or if someone's like, oh, it wasn't that great, I'm like, yeah, cool, whatever. Whereas with Bleach, for some reason, I still have this weird kind of, I still bought this like last year, year 2019, I bought a Bleach figure. So what keeps you coming back to it, or why do we have this? Why do you think we have this relationship with this series that's different to others?
I think it's something that, of course, what we were talking about at the beginning of this entire discussion of what it meant to us, like where it drew us in, why it drew us in differently than other series, because it was so relatable at that time. And it makes, for me at least, it made such a huge impression on my adolescence, my high school years. This was like the entirety of when I was in high school and then into college was spent where I would be excited for the new volumes. And then once I started reading it online with the scans, it was a discussion between me and my friends every week. Like, oh my gosh, the new chapter came out. Did you read that? Oh my gosh, what do you think is happening? Who is that? What is this? So it left such an impression, but it's always this thing where like, with this series, I always want to go back and read it again. And it's such a big commitment to, of course, start again, because I'm like, man, I'd love to just have that experience fresh from the beginning again, experience it from volume one, reassess it as one big chunk of media, and just sit back and enjoy it. Like knowing, having moved forth myself and developed as a person myself, how will I take this in as now as a young adult, as opposed to as a teenager, as a kid in school, and what will it mean to me now? And it's something that's curious to me, and especially now, like coming into this video, doing a little bit of like research, so to say, like trying to refresh myself. All of a sudden I realize how much I have forgotten, and how much I need to go back and re-experience. So I think that's why for me, it has that, but it's also like you were saying, where like, it's something where we were there and we can say what we want about it, but all these other people who don't know Bleach, it's the same and the same thing stands true for One Piece, because you have the people who like, and I don't know if you've seen all the memes right now during quarantine and stuff, where they're like, you can, catch up on One Piece during quarantine finally, and people are like, mm-mm. And I'm like, no, you can't say anything about One Piece. I've been with this series for 17 years. Like, I'll talk crap about it if I want to, but you don't get to. It's the same for, like you said, for Bleach. Like, if someone's going to talk crap about Bleach, like, they better be in the same position as us, like having read and enjoyed it and having witnessed, that fall. And like, you talk crap about it because it broke your heart like it did ours, basically. Like I'm gonna sit here and defend and and it like a year ago when I started coming out like very strongly saying like Ichigo is the best shonen protagonist of all of them, and I was telling people like how it was. I was like, he's in it for his friends. He doesn't want fame. He doesn't want fortune. He's in it because his friends are what matters. And I still stand to that, even with the stupid power creep and with the way that it wrapped and stuff. He's still one of the best shonen protags. He's still such a good, wholesome guy that I would love to just hang with. I don't know. I could just talk for another hour about everything, but it just means so much to my development. And I will never let go of that. Like, I will always hold this series high in my, even if it's not one of the top 10 that I've ever read, it will always be something that like is held in my heart and in my soul as something that meant so much to me, in the same way that a lot of people feel about Dragon Ball Z or Naruto.
No, I think that's right, and I think especially if you think about like how, when you're growing up and you're young and you're trying to define yourself and figure out what makes you different from other people. And I think particularly if you like the big three, you kind of have like that builds into part of your identity. And obviously, like when you're a grown adult, it's not healthy to have brands and, media as part of your identity, because that's how you end up with like the crazy fanboys who are like, you don't like this movie, you're attacking me, blah, 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 kind of business. But I think when you're a young adult, it's kind of like, the fact that you like Bleach versus Naruto versus One Piece versus Dragon Ball Z, like, it's hard to kind of put into words, but it feels like it kind of defines, well, back then at least, it defined something about you in terms of, like, these are the characters I like, this is the world that I like, these are the values that I'm kind of, like placing forward and that, I'm identifying with. And so I think you're right in that it is that kind of relationship that you have with the series where, it could have been a different, like, I'm sure for a lot of people it's like Naruto, if they were the right age, they grew up with Naruto, it's that same kind of feeling. But for me, this was like, it was the right series at the right time. It was just the perfect mix of like modern and fantasy. But like I said, the characters hit you kind of right here in the feels, and it's just a really good series. I think that there's other stuff like Trigun is another one where I saw it a lot. I watched it a lot when I was growing up, and even now as an adult, like I rewatched it a couple of years ago. It doesn't hold up as well as I thought it would. But it still has a lot of sentimental value to me because like Vash and Ichigo were kind of like, and Cloud, but of course, Cloud's in the news again, so everything all is new. But like those guys were kind of like, the characters that you kind of work with to kind of help define yourself and how you view the world, how you deal with the world. And there's something kind of really inspiring about Ichigo just kind of like picking up his sword and he's like, well, I could be like, get the shit beaten out of me, but I'm gonna go give it a good shot anyway because I got to protect the people I care about. And I think that's a really kind of noble ideal. And again, it would just that plus everything else helped make it important. But I think you're right in terms of like for me, it was such a gateway as well to a lot of like mainstream anime, not Bebop or Evangelion, but the kind of world of ongoing anime and things like that. I've found a lot of like J Rock that I really liked through all the openings, and it was just kind of like one of those gateway series that like the experience that I had with it is kind of like irreplaceable because of when it happened and who I was at the time. And so I think that's probably why I know I get a little bit antsy when people like shitting on Bleach, and I'm like, you don't understand, you weren't there, you don't know what it was like, kind of feeling, because it just felt so cool and so relevant, but like also so personal, I think, at the same time. And I know lots of people feel that about lots of their series, so like it's not unique to me. But I think Bleach just happened to be in the right place at the right time, and I got on board at the right time, and it just kind of it captured my imagination in the way that only a few things have like really truly done. Like I've enjoyed stories, like it's not like I dislike Naruto, but like I think maybe only like JoJo's or Hunter x Hunter or like Gundam have kind of been the few other series that have really just like captured me in terms of I could just spend all day like thinking about the universes, and like you said, like wouldn't it be cool if this guy fought this guy, and like what about that power? Like it kind of satisfies that base need for like what if cool guys fought, but also like it has like so much more to it, and it felt like it had for so long. It felt like it had so much potential, and like a huge part of that is that kind of like you don't know what's going to happen next. Oh my god, kind of feeling. So I think. I think that's why and like you said, when you're growing up, that's why it stays with you because, again, like to me, like Luffy's story is kind of like, even though he's like a teenager, he doesn't feel a teenager in the same way that Ichigo does. He's just a teenager going on an adventure. And like Gon and Killua are great, but they're kind of in a whole different realm. Naruto is younger, but Ichigo will kind of always be like even though he's like not really, but he'll still always be like the legitimate like teen protagonist in shonen for me, which is which I even I don't know if you watched the live action movie that's on Netflix, which is not great, but the first half where it's like Ichigo like he defends his friends from like bullies and does a little bit of light hollow fighting, like it really kind of reminded me what I love so much about the series. And I remember when the live action came to Netflix, I was really hyped for it, and I didn't realize that I still loved the series kind of so much. And I think, like the same with this anime, I was like, I wasn't fully prepared to kind of be like, fuck yeah, I'm hyped for this. Like, I'm like, oh, I didn't expect that reaction. But, I think especially as we get older in our 30s, yes, very old, you kind of like, there's a little bit of nostalgia pool as well. And it's kind of like, the idea of like, oh, cool, new Bleach is coming out feels like it's like a nice little safe mental space in like a fairly crazy world to be like, oh, cool, Bleach. Like, that's nice. We've still got Bleach, maybe everything will be okay, kind of feeling. So I think that really helps as well. And I'm sure it's the same for anyone who kind of has those nostalgia properties.
Yeah.
When they bring them back. I know, like I never watched Yu Hakusho growing up, but I know when they had the OVA recently, for that a lot of people had that same kind of response of like, oh man, like it's this thing that I grew up with, and it's just really nice to kind of see it back. And I think the fictional characters having this kind of timelessness, even though you might disconnect from, like, well, not disconnect, but you grow up, you become a different person than who you were in your teens, kind of having that media that's still there that you can remember, like helping define you as a young adult, kind of being able to go back to it is a bit like being able to like, reconnect with your younger self in a little way, which I think is nice as well. And it also helps that like Bleach just has some really kick-ass fights and cool powers. All the sentimental stuff aside, it just rules to watch and look at. It still looks like nothing else. Like truly, I think Kubo is. I know like people like Oda is a great panelist, like and Toriyama like does action like no one else. But I think Kubo doesn't get enough credit for like his crazy like god level design for characters, because if you think about it, I think Arakawa from Fullmetal Alchemist has the same skill set where they have characters who wear the same uniforms, but they manage to make them all look really distinct and different, and that is super hard to do.
Yeah.
And I think if anyone's watched Demon Slayer and likes it, you should go watch Bleach, because I know this will make some people mad, but I think I read somewhere it's like Demon Slayer is like Bleach but cute. And that's not quite like 100% of it. But when they introduced like the Hashira and they're like, here are our 10 top guys, I was like, oh, this is the Gotei 13. And like, I mean that in the nicest way possible. Like I was like, oh fuck yeah, I love like top 10 captain dudes. And they all have their special powers. Like I love that shit. But I was just like, well, if you like that bit of Demon Slayer and you like the idea of like fighting things with swords, your swords have powers. There are 10 powerful dudes in an organization. Like, do I have the series for you? Kind of. That's all I can say in terms of recommending it. But I think people should go check it out. It is cool. It's a good series.
Well, I hope people will watch our video that went on about 3 times as long as I was expecting. But it goes to show how much we have to say about what this series really meant to us and why we love it, despite its flaws and despite what happened at the end. And, even though I've read to the end and was not 100% satisfied with the way, I like the ending. I'll say, like, when the way things wrap up, I'm cool with, but like the way it got there, I'm like, come on. But it says a lot that we're sitting here talking for an hour and a half about what this series meant to us. So on that note, I suppose I should probably wrap this up because I know it's rather late for you, and obviously my wife's already setting off. My wife's setting off fire alarms and stuff, so probably time for me to jump in there and help with stuff. But thank you so much for staying up and having this conversation. It's good to I sometimes feel like I'm in a vacuum where not as many people have the same feelings and the same compassion on some stuff, and it's good to sit down and speak with someone at length to validate my feelings on something that a lot of people are not as vocal about. And I'm hoping that maybe some people will decide to check it out. I'm gonna say, if you decide to go that route, I always say this, but check out the manga over anime, because lack of filler, and for me, you read at a faster pace than you probably will watch. It takes less time. So
and the good thing about Bleach is that you can get that first box set, and that's like the whole Soul Society arc. It's a great if you don't like that, you're not going to like the rest of it. But it's a great story on its own, and the good thing about Bleach is that it was insanely popular. You can get a lot of good secondhand copies, really, really cheap. So it's really easy to get.
And and it's on the.
Thank you for.
Well, I was on that note. Sorry. It's also on the Shonen Jump app. If you subscribe to that for a couple bucks a month, and it's there in its entirety, so you can even check it out there, reading digitally.
Oh my god, what a great bargain! Well, I was going to say thank you for having me on as well, right? I feel like we're the Shelbyville and like Springfield Millhouses. Like I thought I was the only one. Kind of feeling with it, but I guess in a kind of a fitting send off, it like we said, it kind of takes you back to high school, and it's not. Look, it's been many years since I talked to like someone till 1 a.m. in the morning about like, oh man, Bleach is so cool, kind of feeling like that. So it's nice to kind of recapture some of that vibe from many years past now. So it was it's always a pleasure to speak, but it's always good to kind of get Bleach. To tell you how much I love the series, these are these 2 Japanese Bleach volumes that I got when I was in Japan 10 years ago, and they're character guides. I can't read a lick of it, but I was like, oh my god, Japanese Bleach volume, and it's got a foil cover, And I think at one point I had like 4 Bleach shirts, a Bleach hoodie. I even had like the Rukia glove that she has.
Yeah.
And I was just like, yeah, I can wear it to school. It's cool. Like I love that, like that skull design. So good. So I don't think I ever, apart from Gundam, have ever really gone fully as much into something as I have. So I think if hopefully our chat has convinced some people to give it a whirl in
Yeah.
one form or another, and just because people shit on it because it's like it's the popular thing to do, or it didn't end great, doesn't mean it's very much, it's not the destination, it's the journey. And I think
Hmm.
it's definitely worth it for about 20 different reasons. People, we can talk for about an hour and a half. People should see that as a sign of why it's good.
Absolutely. And from across the world, literally two complete different sides of this earth, and we're coming together
Yes.
to discuss. So it's a global thing here. The love for Bleach is global.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll go ahead and start wrapping this up then. Thank you again for coming in here, and thank you for anyone who watches this in its entirety. I commend you. The 1.5 speed might be your friend here to get through faster. But thank you so much for watching. Thanks for tuning in. Hopefully some people go out and try some Bleach, whether it be anime or manga. And, I'll post this at some time soon so people can watch an hour and a half of us gushing on this series. Hope everyone across the globe is staying healthy, safe, and sane is a really important part of that. And yeah, so I'll see everyone on the next one, and we are done.